Blaise Hope at the World Economic Forum, and with Jean-Pierre Ferlenbach, managing partner of Bain, Indonesia, talking about the report about conglomerates teaching dinosaurs to dance. Well, they're dancing pretty well in emerging economies. We spoke about Astra. Can you recap what you said about sector diversification and leadership?
Yes, Blaise. So yes, they are doing well in general, conglomerates in Asia, much better than in the Western world, but we also saw from our study that in order for them to continue to do well, they have to evolve as the economy mature. In the initial stage, as we said, they have to pick the high growth sector of the economy and basically ride the wave of those sectors with the economy. As the economy starts maturing, picking sectors where they can actually be leaders become much more important. So it's more about leadership, less picking up high growth sector. So that in itself opens a whole kind of new challenges because not necessarily all sectors will allow the conglomerates to become leader. And that leads to the third trait of performance which we observe, which become more and more important as the economy mature, which is the degree of focus of the portfolio. So by definition, they are conglomerates, so they are in many sectors. But you see conglomerates, especially in the early stage of the economies, which are incredibly far-fetched in the number of sectors that they cover. Whereas you do see some conglomerates which have basically 70 to 80% of their revenues or activities which is concentrated in two sectors. And what we found in our research is that as the economy becomes more mature, conglomerates are forced, at least the high-performing conglomerates, tend to focus on a couple of areas which end up representing 70 or 80% of their business. And one of the reasons, again, is that as markets become more competitive, they have to concentrate their managerial strengths, their financial strengths into a more limited number of sectors.
Is this a case of wealth defense as the economy matures? Or are the conglomerates in mature economies doing the right thing? Or is it just that they're also doing the right thing and pioneering in emerging economies, they're just doing better?
I actually don't think it's necessarily doing worse or better. It's actually doing what's right for the time, and also thinking a little bit beyond the curve. So in other words, the best conglomerates see the change in their markets coming up and they start preparing for it. One example, which I think is interesting in this region, is the example of Sembcorp. Sembcorp is a Singapore-based, now 10 billion Singapore dollar group, very successful, focused on engineering and marine business. They used to have, 10 years ago, an incredibly dispersed number of businesses, including some food business, some logistics business. A lot of those businesses, well, some of them were quite substantial, but underperforming, and the conglomerate was underperforming. As Singapore market became more sophisticated, they basically decided to focus their energy in two businesses, engineering and marine, and potentially a third one, which could be a third leg of their expansion, which were industrial parks. They started to sell a lot of those underperforming businesses and focus their energy and resources on those three businesses, which today account for 75 to 80% of their market value. So that's the path, typical path, which many of the best performing conglomerates have to embark upon if they want to keep being successful.
You speak about capital markets, dealing with different capital markets. Can you speak a little bit about Indonesia's right now? What needs to happen?
Yes, well, capital markets play an important role in shaping the destiny of conglomerates. So in the most sophisticated markets where you have deep capital market, very active shareholders, what's happening is that a lot of the shareholders are asking conglomerates to break themselves up because they feel that investors have the possibility to decide themselves which sectors they want to bundle, how to diversify their risk, and they don't want to pay for the overhead of a big group putting together a very dispersed set of businesses. But in less mature markets, the situation is very different because capital markets are not as deep and as active, and Indonesia is a case in point. It has it has capital market, stock market which is doing well, but it's still pretty shallow. Number two, a lot of the conglomerates which we're talking about are only partially listed. They often are still controlled by the founders and the family which started the businesses. And therefore the investor doesn't have a lot of choice. I mean, it's not like they can either invest in that conglomerate or decide to buy separate pieces of pure play companies. So the situation is very different. As capital markets become deeper, investors have more choices, and in general this brings more focus to the conglomerates and put a lot of pressure in them being more focused.
So is there a trajectory in line with an economy of conglomerates forming, growing to a large size and then breaking up?
I think there is a tendency, I mean, it doesn't need to go to the full breakup, but I think there is a clear tendency which goes from land grab. We're on the ground, we know the country better than the international companies, we have better contacts, better access to talent, which is a rare commodity. We understand the government and the regulations, so we are more astute in picking it, and we know which sectors are actually the most promising in the country. We put our flags everywhere where we see growth. That's kind of stage one. To stage 2 and 3, where the market is becoming more of an even playing field, both for MNCs and local companies. Yes, access to government regulators is still important, but it's less of a privileged field for the local players. Everybody can have access to it. Capital markets are becoming bigger. One aspect which we haven't talked about is that it becomes more important to move outside of a domestic market and to start playing internationally. And then I think what you see is that the initial role of the games are changing. So now it's not so much about outsmarting the foreign competition in your domestic market. It's actually more about building strong leadership position in a bit of a narrower set of sectors. And then when you've got a strong domestic base, it's actually taking them internationally.
How do you, before we go to break, how do you define the role of leadership in family-run companies?
So it's leadership in family-owned companies actually both very exciting and unique and brings some unique asset to those companies, and also very challenging. What's unique and exciting is that family-owned companies were born with an incredible set of forceful values, which we call at Bain founder's mentality, either because the founder is still active or because he has left those values behind, and they are summarized by incredible entrepreneurial drive, hatred of complexity and bureaucracy, and very strong connection to the front line of the business, and those are incredibly valuable.
Let's hold there. We'll revisit that in the next segment. We've got to take a break right now. We'll be right back with our coverage with Jean-Pierre at the World Economic Forum on East Asia in Jakarta.